Okay, hey everyone. Just coming back in. Life has been incredibly difficult for the last month, and I think 2 days ago I just had my final straw. Um, I'm reading up on my Charles Bukowski for a little bit because I I remember he had a quote. It's like love is a fog that burns at the first daylight of reality. It's one of his favorite poems and things that he wrote. It's just incredibly stark, but that's where I'm at right now. Um, so much of this is going down. The ICE protests are starting to move all throughout California now. Los Angeles is having huge crackdowns, and everyone knows that they're coming deeper into California, straight to the Bay Area. They're just working on the larger operations on that side first. Out here, the organization of crime is much better coordinated. There are more families on this side. Um, the simple situation and the way I'll put it out there is that the cartels are losing on all grounds. They have been attacked financially, where the FTL designation is now being completely connected to the business structure of America. Meaning, if you're seen working with a cartel controlled business, whether it be on the surface or on higher levels of coordination, you're seen as funding a foreign terrorist organization. Um, in that way, they are destroying the financials of the cartel on the larger scale of distribution networks for information, and on the lower ends, where you have these deals happening between drug dealers and such, and the human trafficking, that is all being cleaned up by ICE agencies as well. It's a two-pronged attack, but I'm not here to talk to you guys about that. I'm here to talk to you guys more about my personal story, and I'm ready to tell you guys just about everything, what happened in its entirety. So, I mentioned before that I got moved around when I was working for these construction companies. I basically got into the line of construction by one of my mentors who thought it would be a good fit for me. I jumped in first at a company called Legacy Mechanical, in which case I was just an accounts receivable guy collecting money. Back then, I was making calls about First Republic Bank and everything that was going on with their investment trades and all of that. This is before Silicon Valley Bank and First First Republic both had. This is before they had started to announce that they would be going bankrupt because of their investment liquidation, and they got bought out by a larger bank. I forget which one it was, but the situation lies that there's a I was telling everyone that there is a massive bubble that's about to go off in the financial market, and I was trying to explain to everyone since then that there was going to be another monetary collapse soon. And the reason I was saying this was because back in 2008, with the financial crisis that we had, it happened because they were loaning out loans, like investments, to just anyone on the street, no matter of employment status or anything like that, so that these contractors could get their cut of the loan. The trouble kind of comes by in that, how do I put this? The companies that are now being presented inside of this gross market are currently taking credit lines with valuations that are way higher than they should be allowed to receive. Um, the reason that's the case is because they're setting up their businesses as a form of collateral, but the reporting on the businesses is incorrect. There's a lot of accounting loopholes that you can take, but basically they can do things like do share buybacks, which they can sell off a bunch of the shares of the market, excuse me, buy back massive amounts of the shares of their company from multiple agencies and people, and that artificially increases the value of the share per price. So they can do this kind of thing to make the valuation of their company seem huge, and then what they do is that they go over, get these credit lines, and use the money. But because a lot of these companies are not at the valuation that they're claiming, they're actually going to end up, well, not having the collateral necessary to like reap it up. And you would think with a business structure, it would be cool because they can keep reinvesting the funds. But the trouble is that part of the collateral that they've been listing off are houses. Now, why is a house a big deal? It's because the valuation is way too expensive all across the United States due to these housing cartels that basically come together, change the prices together, and operate off of that. It's um it's creating an issue with the financial markets. It's creating issues all around. And with so many companies that are about to go under, specifically because of the advancement of AI and quantum computing systems, it looks like this crash is going to have a bigger problem than anyone else expected. Um, I'm really thinking about it because the whole reason why like a business's assets would be considered so expensive and they would allow for these larger loans is because they're either doing well or they're not really they're not reporting it correctly. I'm thinking about the accounting process right now, but that's the trouble. One, a lot of these banks end up figuring out that these companies are no longer doing too well, including companies like BlackRock, like Blackstone, excuse me, that did the exact share buyback program that I was telling you about, while they were losing money on property, on the properties that they were buying because they can't sell them out anymore. It wasn't a buyer strike; people were just refusing to buy homes. And because they couldn't afford them. It's an affordability issue. So what you have now is a ton of very intelligent, very rich people who now um, have received a lot of money that they may never end up giving back because they might end up getting like Section 8, you know, not Section 8, excuse me. They might end up going bankrupt. But my thoughts are a bit scattered. I just wanted to explain what I was explaining first. When I first came over to Legacy Mechanical and I was there, I was explaining to everyone that there would be issues with the banking systems. I had spoken to First Republic Bank downstairs, where I spoke to a Ukrainian representative, and I was talking a lot about some of the discoveries and things that I'm making inside of the financial world. Um, but the thing is that I went from place to place. I did that at Legacy first, and then in all these areas of construction, I kept going into these companies and kind of pointing things out. Uh, I knew that you know business would be bad for quite a bit because of the state of our like national economy, and I called all of it. All of the things that I was saying were happening in live time. Um, I went from there to a arborist company where I was an accountant. Then I moved from the arborist company to a different company called Monticelli Painting, where we had some issues with placement while I was there. Basically, they didn't know what my duties would be. And then from there, they moved me over to a company, construction company by the name of Greenwall Tech. So here, they treated me incredibly well. The CFO would buy lunch for everyone every single day, which should have cued me off to something strange happening. Um, I had gone over and done a job for them for quite some time. I was dating my girlfriend. Her name was Carla. Um, really taking care of her. And what ended up happening is I guess at some point I either offended someone because through my daily thought processes, I'm looking at the entirety of the environment in which they're operating. And I was looking at process improvement formats for the construction company that I was working at um, for Greenwall. And while I was there and while I was working for them, I came to the conclusion that a lot of the moves that they were making in the field of construction were not preparing them for what was going to come. So I was whining like a little baby about it for quite some time. I was talking about how the housing market is going to collapse, how construction isn't going to be good, how when construction starts, it's going to be in single family homes and there are going to be renovations and retrofits all throughout, specifically through San Francisco, because the average house was built in the 1970s and seismic activity codes were updated since like 1985. A lot of those buildings are not retrofitted and they actually have wear and tear from like sea exposure. Plus, the area isn't good for the concrete either. But I was explaining this to them, and pushing this narrative that we should be prepared for what's coming. I was listening to Danielle DiMartino Booth, who is the CEO of, I believe it's Q Research. I think that's no. It was an analytics company that takes a look at financial records. She used to work as one of the treasurers in the United States Treasury Department before she started her own company and started to do research on the analytics of the situation. Um, and I was kind of I I'm sorry. Sometimes when I speak, I don't realize it. Sometimes when I speak, I don't realize that I'm actually pretty fucking smart. Um, that's yeah, but that's basically what happened. I was pointing out because I understood that I can't convince anyone with my personal background, ethos, logos, and pathos, right? Um, I had no ethos. I wasn't a financial specialist or anything like that. I'm just a self-taught man. So I rely on the words of smarter people and people with a higher background. So ethos, I pointed to Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad, Multimillionaire Guy. I pointed to Danielle DiMartino Booth, who used to work at the Treasury, and I confirmed all my ideals and everything that was happening through them. Um, when I guess the people I was working with at Greenwall Tech realized that I was intelligent and they wanted me. I think they found out that I'd been going to college since I was like 14 years old because I was in middle college, high school, um, and they wanted me. So they systematically tried to ruin my life to make me join up with them. They offered me $1 million. They offered me so much. And this is how it happened. I think it started um, in my home. Some people lie about their lives. Okay. Um, I lied about my life maybe about 3 or 4 times, including once during the interview process to work there. There's a lie that I've been telling my whole life about being in Mexico for a bit. But besides that, didn't really have. Oh, and I another one that I used to have cancer. It's something that I did um, when I was younger. Uh, it was kind of a coping mechanism to get through something that was very difficult, which was separation with my first girlfriend. Um, but it was a lie that I told for many years. But after and of course now I'm acknowledging it because of what's happened. Um, I kind of figured out honesty is the best policy for this, but regardless, I need to explain what exactly had been happening. I had started hearing things inside of the apartment complex where I lived. And at first, I thought it was like, I thought that maybe I'm mishearing things because the people I lived with would come out into the living room and they would just speak ill of me, like insulting aspects about who I am, stuff like that. And I didn't think anything of it. Um, and, I just got used to it after a while. Uh, I was kind of, not really perturbed by it, and I wasn't going to go out there and argue with anyone. Then I looked up what gang stalking was, all of these different aspects of how they control people and how they turn, you know, the community against you, basically. And at first, I thought that's what it was, and I thought that's what the whole situation was. And then I thought it might be psychological later. Because I thought that maybe I was mishearing something, or maybe I'm just tired. There are things people hear about it, but um, as I started doing research, I started figuring out what the hell was actually going on, and it's the scariest thing on the planet to wake up one morning and figure out that the CIA, the local governments, and a lot of people around the world have access to this ability. At first, I thought it was technology. Um, I thought that and I'm gonna say what it is. It's just psychic capability. It's the ability to read other people's thoughts, the ability to communicate into someone's mind. Um, and I was terrified. I thought for a long time that this might be something, spiritual. Um, but I immediately understood that it wasn't. More than that, I started doing deep internal kind of fixations, trying to fix anything that I found that was bad inside of me. But we're not talking about the response to them. I'm talking about what was happening to me. They were psychologically torturing me for multiple months, and they did things on the surface level of reality as well. When I went over and I started explaining that all these things were happening, that they're talking shit about me to my girlfriend, explaining everything to her, things seemed fine. She was saying, "Well, fuck them, don't worry about them, whatever." Um, then what happened is terrible. She and I were getting ready, and I think what happened is that I'm hoping that she was forced to comply, but she recommended and she drove me to a psychiatric institution. Um, and the reason that she wanted me to go was so that I could get a drug test because I had been overhearing people in my workplace basically say for a long time that I was on drugs, which didn't make any sense. I just have a little bit of autism and I study too much. I was even watching lectures from like the Stanford University that they have for free during my 30-minute breaks so I can educate myself. Um, they think most of the people who are like at the Fortune 1% of the world are actually like partially autistic. I think Jeff Bezos got it. They think Musk has it. That's the lecture I was listening to, one of them. Um, but the trouble kind of lies in that I guess they wanted a reason or they wanted to screw with me, so they kept saying that I was on drugs. And that wasn't actually the case. They were just manipulating my behavior and fucking with me because I was teaching people too much about the actual state of our government, the state of the world, the state of finance, and telling people everywhere I went what was actually going on instead of having people just hear from their financial officer or another guy. No, everything's gonna be fine. It's easy to see, it's easy to point out. So I was doing it, but they went after me. They messed with a lot of the people that I used to live with and kind of pigeonholed me there. Uh, After I went into the psychiatric ward, I was only supposed to be there. Keep in mind, I have studied the DSM-5. I know quite a bit about psychology. I took a personality development class in college. I know about the acronym for personality matrices: ocean, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. I'm very well versed in psychology. um, and what happened was that I went in and they were trying to get me into a state of psychosis. So once I went in, everything had been subtle up until this point. Nothing had been direct, but then they started directly communicating with me and they were fucking with me. They were bringing up past histories, things that I've done in the past that not many things, but there's a handful of things that I deeply regretted. Um, and they were psychologically torturing me the whole time that I was inside of the psychiatric ward. But I have conversations with myself all the time and in my own mind. I'm always in my own head. So it kind of was a comfortable situation. I could maintain composure on the outside and also speak to them and communicate and basically get terrified more and more the longer I was in there. They were trying to invoke a state of deep psychosis, and I wasn't having it. I wasn't letting anyone read my moves or see the distress that I was going through. They tried to make me think that there was a hostage negotiation that was happening. Um, they tried to make me think so many different things. They tried to make me think that the government was coming in and there was a helicopter over the top of the psychiatric ward. They were funneling in everything that they could. And I wasn't supposed to be held there for as long as I was. Normally, when you get in, I went into the psychiatric emergency to let them know that I just wanted to take a drug test. And I got the drug test, thankfully. But I, uh, I went over and I was basically resisting them the whole time. What was I? Right. At this point, now I know that they have this capacity and capability to fuck with the general populace. But the problem is that there were other people there. The doctor who had initially received me basically asked me why the hell I'm there because I seem to be completely and utterly healthy. Seems to be nothing wrong with me whatsoever. Um, and then, because I went into the emergency, they said that I didn't have a threat to kill myself or do anything else like that, so it's not really that big an emergency. He wanted me to go, but he went into the back, then came back, and he looked scared. And he said that they're going to keep me on an involuntary hold. Um, so they were going to keep me for 72 hours. And I don't know why. They said that I had been saying that I felt like someone was listening on camera, stuff like that. And I had never said anything like that to them. Um, so I went over and they held me there for, we're supposed to hold me there for about 72 hours, but the whole time they were messing with me. Uh, they had me try to believe that there were a group of people called the Knights Templar. I didn't even know who they were. I had to research it afterwards, uh, which is two possible organizations. It could be a criminal organization, or it could be the Catholic Church's like stronghold area in Africa, because they were of African descent when I was inside of that hospital. Um, I was. They were trying everything they could to get a genuine reaction out of me, but they couldn't. And I kept my my head on a swivel. I kept kind of careful as I was operating throughout that. Once I came out of the hospital, um, well, first off, I was supposed to be there for 72 hours, but they kept me there for 5 days. They had no other reason. They basically violated my rights and they kidnapped me. Because once I was there in that hospital, I should have been let go within 72 hours as my rights. But they didn't have any kind of information. They couldn't find any bout of psychosis. Everything was internal when I was panicking. So they couldn't outwardly control or do anything to me. Once I got out of the hospital, um, everything stopped. I didn't hear voices anymore for maybe a whole 3 weeks. And then I woke up one night and I started hearing them again. And keep in mind, this only happened once I went into the ward and I realized what they were doing. They were basically creating drug dealers. They make you go through an intense state of psychosis so that you can't hold a gun. And then they force you to sell drugs. The trouble is that and I think the reason that they do this is so that they have something on you and they can force you to keep quiet. Um, they use people for different things, and maybe some people even benefit from like joining up with organized crime. But what happened to me was beyond something that you can repair. It's beyond anything like that. I resisted everything that they've done. I resisted all of their tactics when they offered me money. They offered me $1 million. They offered me a restaurant. They offered me a motel. They offered me a bunch of stuff. And I just didn't want to be involved. Um, I, these were things that they did on the surface. Okay. So after all of this happened, they went over. and were just fucking with me and everyone in my general vicinity. The gang stalking happened 7 times more. Um, the statements that they would make in the backgrounds, which I now know is kind of one of those things. They've also did things like they had a vacuum system that they put itching powder into, and they vacuumed it into my room. Um, and I had some polyester clothes that I had just bought up. I knew that they were good for filtration, so I actually tore them apart and put them over my arms, my legs, and was breathing through them to make sure none of that stuff got in my lungs. Um, I'm pretty sure they were screwing with me. They were just generally screwing with me. They were having fun with it. Um, then I started looking into like how psychics kind of would ever come about, and I realized that they are bigger than most people imagine, and they're usually involved in organized crime. If you go onto the dark web and you navigate any browser, any hidden wiki page, you'll see a ton of ads for psychics, like $200,000, stuff like that. It's been around for quite some time. It's just hidden away from regular, everyday, day to day people. Um, the thing is that after all of that happened and I was at home, now I'm hearing constant things where they're genuinely fucking with me. They're making me feel shame, regret. Uh, I found out that they were also fucking with the people in my workplaces. I work for Amazon, DSF6, DSF8, excuse me, where I was working for one of the delivery agencies, NorCal Last Mile. And while working with them, was being, I was behind the wheel while I was being tortured psychologically for days. They would do things like they kept me up in some instances for days on end without sleeping, just bombarding me with shame, guilt, and all these other aspects of self that were like destructive, self-destructive. And eventually I got numb to it. I kind of stayed in the adversity long enough that I eventually started building a resistance to it and fixing the actual problems that were coming up. But they had also tried to invoke a sense of like another sense of what is it, psychosis. And the way they did it was actually incredibly interesting. They had set up a scenario that was involving my friends, my girlfriend, all being in trouble. And I went into a community center that was located in Berkeley Avenue and banged on a wall. I knew what it was. I knew it was just a ploy from them to try and get me to do something. But I went over to go bang on the wall and pretended to be completely and utterly in panic. I even went over on an ambulance ride in to this hospital that they were sending me to. I faked yelled because I could see that they wanted more of a reaction. Um, Once they put me in to the hospital and I got pulled out, I looked around and I was no longer in a hospital. I was in a psychiatric, excuse me, in an optometrist center on 12th Street in Oakland. So they had, this is when I knew things were bad because I knew that the organized crime element had been working with sheriff's departments. They had sheriffs walking the lines, acknowledging things from my history to my face. um, they had doctors that were involved in the psychic phenomenon that were operating off of this. They had the owner of the hospital that actually spoke up and was trying to get me to stay after I had a trial, a court appearance for the 5150 status that they did, where they wouldn't let me speak. Um, they involved so many people. And when it came to this part where I stepped out of this optometrist center and I noticed what was happening, I realized that legitimately they have so much control over the state. And it is the state. Because I thought for a bit that it might be smaller than that. But because there were so many channels, I went to Berkeley, I went to El Cerrito, I went to San Pablo, and there were all of these elements in every single side. like it became very clear to me that this is a government thing. This is like a local government thing. Like the state is owned by criminal enterprises. I was like, oh shit, so this is kind of like New York. The only surprising thing about all of this is the fact that they had access to psychic abilities. And when you think about later on, Nostra Cosa, right? The gangs of the Italian mobs and whatever, you forget that that was their policy too. So I started making connections, I started doing research, but they involved so many people. They involved local police forces, they involved paramedics, they involved, and one of the drivers, the leads from NorCal Last Mile, was actually in the ambulance ride once we came back and they were doing a form. I had already suspected something like that would happen. Um, they were trying to make me seem make me look weak, induce psychosis, something like that. But I know that organized crime is many layers deeper than that. And I also know that there are even bigger things when it comes to governance and the people who actually run the state. Um, they mostly actually do stay in the shadows, but this was cartel operations. And I know because at the workplace that I was for drywall, um, it was a bunch of very like the owners were all a family, right? De Leon. And I found out recently that basically the higher ups in cartel functions are all by blood. So you find out, oh, that makes sense. A family-run business, plus the amount of power that they hold to do all of these things. They had one of the members of the family, his name is Daniel De Leon, actually come and walk through the psychiatric ward last year in April. Um, he walked through there, so there are cameras that should have been able to capture him there too. Um, it's very clear, but these things all happened to me over the course of a year, all over the course of a year. They ruined my life completely. Um, After that, I was still dealing with them consistently. I decided to work for a company called what is it, Strive Real Estate, and I believe that they were fucking with my CEO there. Um, I ended up leaving because I didn't want to get her into any trouble. Uh, she made me a financial officer instead of just a regular standard accountant. So I was in an executive level financial position, and I was learning how to do the role, but it was just a lot for integration. The other problem with all of this is that I know that when people bump into a guy like me, they'll think that I'm crazy, that I'm absolutely insane. I mean, what is it?